Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Kimbolt Bourrie, multidisciplined UI UX designer and 3D modeler with over 23 years of professional experience designing everything from games to websites. Her current Kickstarter for 3D printable dice towers and more is already way past its funding goal. Still has 19 days to go. Kim, welcome to the Binge. How you doing?
Good. Thanks, James.
Hey, when Mike set up this interview, so Mike, our producer, I was like, dice towers, let's do it. Absolutely. I'm in, man. This is exciting. So I want to kind of take, because, getting to where you are now, where you're making dice towers, that's not something you just jump into. Like this started this kind of weaving path to get there.
Yeah.
Let's start off with, you worked for EA Games?
I did. Yeah. In fact, I met my husband there.
Oh, wow. And so what did you do there? So you did the UI and UX. Can you explain what that is to people? Like, what is UI? What is UX?
Sure. Yeah. So I was hired on at EA Games to work on a game called Tetris Blitz.
Okay.
I love Tetris. I'm not very good at it. But my responsibilities were to create all the interface. So everything that you interact with, how you get into the game mode, how you play it, and what happens when you finish. So I pretty much designed the flow and the visuals in the game. And then you test it and find that it was a terrible design. And then you have to go back and make things a whole lot more obvious. And then keep testing and redesigning until you feel like you have a solid product that most people can interact with.
And is this mainly like mobile devices? Is this like on phones and things like that? Or is it like game consoles or what
UI, UX? So in the games industry, it's more UI, UX. Outside of that, they call it more UX, user experience, which is more focused on the user experience. And then the visual design comes later. So the UI part of the design side is the visuals. It's the buttons. It's in the case of Tetris, it's the tetraminos, the little squares.
Yeah.
It's the skin as well as the interactivity. But in the web, it's typically more the usability, and then the visual design comes later.
So in terms of the actual program, so then would that design then go over to a programmer who then program the functionality of it?
Yes.
Or okay, so then you create the buttons, you create the whole kind of user interface, you send over to the programmer, and does the programmer look at it sometimes and just say, I don't know how to work with these.
We work directly with them throughout the whole process to make sure everything we do is codable. And we'll come up with prototypes and we'll test those throughout the whole process. And then they'll tie in the back end and make sure it's a solid piece of software.
And then how did you get into some of the other things you've got here, like a Magic the Gathering is on your CV, right? Like Fortnite, talk to us about that. Those are some big names, right? Like
getting into the games industry is really hard because everyone wants to work on a game.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to be hired by EA after I met my husband, and then we had our first kid. I actually started doing contract work full-time from home so I could be close to where his daycare is.
Got it.
So from there, I've had a number of really fantastic clients that I either work directly with Epic or other large clients, either directly with the client or they were a client of my client kind of thing. So once you get a game under your belt, then you have a little more it's a lot easier to continue working for other game industries or other game companies because they know you have industry experience.
So it becomes almost like a network. Once you're finally on the inside, then it's like, okay, it's like, hockey teams, right? Okay, there's a good player over there. Let's see if we can get him over on our team to help us out.
Exactly.
Good
and
at X, Y, Z.
And most of my clients are people I've worked with or people that is a network of someone I've worked with.
Got it. And then did you take this in school or like, how did you get into this in the first place? So like what?
So personal story, I had severe ADD as a kid.
Okay.
So, and we moved around the United States. I lived in upstate New York, California, New York, Tennessee, So by the time I graduated from high school, I already had a passion for computer games and art and design, and I had a pretty good portfolio. So I just went directly right into working full time. And back then, I mean, it was it was right as the internet was starting to become a thing, and everybody wanted to have a product on the online. So that was really where I got my start. Was like, I'm talking like AOL. I'm talking like the
Wow.
very beginnings of the internet. I'm old.
And so if you're kind of learning as you go, was there a lot of like failure that
Oh
kind
yeah.
of led to kind of the
Oh,
learnings and so forth? And
oh yeah. I was my very first job was for a big ad agency. Intel was their main client. I deleted a whole directory of work because I thought you use the back button to go back a folder. So for sure, there was a lot of stumblings and a lot of I would say I graduated from the school of hard knocks. But no one magically just walks in and gets it right. And for sure, it's taken a lot of heartache and a lot of wrong turns to be where I'm at today.
then how did that kind of lead into like we've talked to other people who've worked in the video game industry, right? And
Yeah.
then for them, the kind of the transition to the board game industry was almost like a relief from the computers, right? Saying, okay, I
Oh
still
yeah.
want to kind of tap the creative side, but I want to kind of, I've been on computers all day. I want to get away from that and start doing things with my hands, more tactile. What was it for
Yeah.
you that brought you over to the board game side?
And it's funny. I actually started out in print media.
Okay.
Very first job was as designing catalogs essentially. So
Oh, cool.
after EA, I did it. I had a number of projects that were tabletop game related. One was for Canada, was a global global warming game where
Okay.
you're trying to save the planet. And just a number of smaller projects for various clients. You had a game that they needed an artist for. Yeah,
Wow.
and then I started getting into 3D printing in 2015. It was just a hobby thing.
Yeah.
Uh, I got this crappy little printer that barely worked, and then I bought another one and bought another one, and just learned the whole process and learned that it sucked in some places, and then it was super cool when it actually printed something.
And what did you start off your 3D printing with? So when you're doing the 3D printing, was it just kind of anything you could create just to kind of experiment
Yeah,
with this new technology or
yeah. So I started with a bunch of free stuff from Thingiverse. That's a
okay.
really a great place to start. You know, you
Yep.
can see what's popular and what people have had a lot of luck printing, and then you could give it a try from there. I actually, my main reason of why I got into 3D printing was to start 3D modeling. I've always wanted a 3D model, but in my career, there was never a, a great smart place to have that skill set, at least in my career path.
Yeah.
So I bought ZBrush or ZBrush and started learning on my own on the side and started modeling stuff and 3D printing it, and then slowly started getting my name out there because these were just practice files really.
Yeah.
But I released a file called Fancy Skull, and for some reason it really caught on and it started getting my name out there, which was pretty cool.
And you just sent it out for free or was it something
Yeah,
that you were selling or
no, it was for free. Yeah, so free is a good way to get your name out there. You don't get any money, but you do get you kind of get your foot in the door for
you get
sure.
recognition and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So how long has like Fate's End been in play? Like, so how long is the company in its kind of current structure as Fate's End been
So
existence?
I last January I had an entire month and a half of no client work. I had a
Okay.
project that was promised, it didn't come through, and we do not live in a way that we cannot have money coming in. So
Sure.
I was freaking out. So I loved 3D printing and modeling, and I did a lot of research, and I was working on someone else's Kickstarter campaign and told him of my situation, and he was like, you should really do your own campaign. And so I came up with Fate's End. You know, I thought, you know, no one's really doing anything with dice towers. it's a fun thing to play with, architecture for various, RPG classes. That's awesome. So,
Yeah.
My husband and I would walk around the lake with our kids and talk about ways we can skin it. And I was like, it kind of makes sense that it's fate's end because it rolls through, and that is fate's call.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah,
once
yeah,
it's
yeah.
rolled through. So it was really February of last year that I was like, I have to do something with this. And I spent a month on it. My husband thought I was crazy, but he was supportive. So it's been just slightly over a year.
So were you playing Dungeons and Dragons or RPG before that? So you were already like a D&D player and into it heavy. So dice towers, for people that don't know what dice towers are, they're essentially a structure you put on the table that you can plop a die into the top, clunk, clunk, clunk all the way through, and then it spits a dice out the bottom and takes away kind of the human interface of rolling a die, right? So it's completely random. There's no way you can manipulate that die. Exactly. Comes through the way it does. And in towers, you're starting to see more and more, I guess, different architectural spins on that, right? On getting it in a way that it thematically fits with either the Dungeons and Dragons map and themes you're working on, or you're even seeing now dice towers go into regular gameplay, right? Where people have games that require dice, something kind of neat as a showpiece to have on the table, and they can put the die through and it rolls, and you have a way of kind of a fun way of rolling the dice and playing.
Exactly.
So
but
when
I was gonna slide in, dice towers are not a new thing. They've been around for thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
The Romans actually had dice towers. In fact, they found one. I'll have to get more information, but they've been around for thousands of years.
Oh, send me a link to that. I'll post that on the page for sure. I love seeing any kind of archaeology when they come up with like a game, right? Like the famous ones, Tutankhamun's tomb. There was, I think, 3 or 4 Senate boards in there. There's, anytime you can see the games have been part of human history since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Cool. It is cool. It's not just but I didn't know that. I didn't know that dice towers were that old. I just assumed it was something that happened with D&D playing, but man, that is cool. So you were doing D&D RPG. To you, it made sense. Hey, want to create kind of this custom dice tower.
Yeah.
How did that then? And then you're in a situation where client work is tapered off. We need to bring some income in. So Fate's End essentially was launched with your first Kickstarter campaign, I guess, then, was it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. And that first campaign was successful, right? Like I think you raised something like, I'll put this in Canadian dollars because it always sounds way bigger. $121,000, 2,706 backers you had on that first campaign.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Crazy, right? My first campaign.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to maybe make 40 at the most.
Yeah.
It was, it definitely launched a new career path that I hadn't really considered before, which is super cool. Yeah.
What blows me away about that is that it is all digital assets.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like you're not selling any physical thing, right? You're and not to downplay the importance of, all the work and effort that goes into creating, a digital sculpture. That, I mean, I don't want to, give that any disservice at all. But there's no physical thing that your time is basically your money in, right?
Exactly.
And but there's no actual investment to actually go and build stuff other than that time.
Yep.
That is incredible. Like I mean, like anybody wants to run the profit margins on something when you're not actually selling a physical thing, you're selling something digital. That
there's no shipping costs or angry people about shipping costs.
Did it surprise you the number of people that said, like I probably have a dice tower, but I want Kim's dice tower?
Yeah. Oh no, it's been remarkable. We had a couple hundred backers who don't even own a 3D printer, who joined the campaign and went out and bought a 3D printer just so they could print these.
That is crazy.
Right? That's so crazy.
Like it's something I think that more people are talking about, right? 3D print. Like I don't even have a 3D printer. It's on my list, right? So it's on my list of things I'm going to get to.
On your list.
It will be. It's just it's time though, right? It takes time to actually manipulate the files and print and so forth. But 100% as a game designer, it is something that will be part of our toolkit in the very near future.
Yeah.
And I look at different ones and so forth, and then it's always like, well, do you go for that one, or do you spend more and go for the bigger one? Because bigger, if it's more expensive, must be better. It's got to be tough to make these kind of choices. But for people that are watching, I want to share my screen, and for anybody listening, I encourage you to go to fatesend.net and check out Kim's page. It is just beautiful works of art. So like I don't even look at these like dice towers. Like I really look at these as art, right? As showpieces. Is like, do you work with artists, or is some of this art design yours, or how does that kind of come together?
So I have a great concept artist named Matthew S. Armstrong. I actually worked with him at one of the gaming companies that I worked for. And he was a big deal with Disney Infinity.
Okay.
It's just such a nice guy too. So when I started this project, I approached him because I 3D, I don't 2D art well.
Yeah.
And he was super excited about it. He's into D&D and tabletop gaming. And essentially I would bring him what I wanted it to be with some reference photos or art or whatever. And he would sketch out these amazing concepts. And every time he totally nailed it as far as what I had in my head. And he's been great to collaborate with for sure.
With some of these images, like I know some of them were, I was surprised because you and I, just before we got on air, I was talking about one of your designs, which I thought was amazing. And it was a render. That I guess is that the version I had seen was actually a render. It wasn't actually a physical thing. But in some cases, like I see some of these pictures where they're kind of luminescent, right? So is there certain plastics you can get to create that effect, or are most of these painted, or how does that work?
So this group you're looking at right here. So it's for those of you who are listening, when you go to the website, it's the second group that says photos.
Yeah.
I think photos.
Fatesend.net.
So these photos here, so the one in the middle here, it's a blue kind of one with a spire. These are printed with silk filaments. And when you print them extra hot at kind of small layer heights, they are just gorgeous. They reflect the light. Oh man, they're fun to photograph too. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's what I love about 3D printing is you have a world of materials to play with, colors and and I mean, some of these really show the texture super well, and it's fun. Like you don't even have to paint them for them to look like art, but the painted ones are so super cool.
Yeah, you can kind of take the next level, and there's rainbow ink as
filaments.
Well. Yeah, which is just crazy. So you don't just do dice towers; you also do GM or game master screens and dice jails. I didn't even know what a dice jail was.
Neither did I.
Sorry, guys. I know I do a group called Board Game Binge. Dice jail, I don't know. So talk to us about what a dice jail is.
So when I had my previous campaign, people kept asking for it. I had no idea what it is, but essentially it's a way for you to torture your bad dice. So if you have a die, like a D20 that keeps rolling 1 or 2, you can put it in timeout. Which I love the concept of. So we've got an Iron Maiden, we've got a gelatinous cube, and there's a legit timeout chair with a dunce cap.
So if you want to punish your dice for not rolling nice, you can create a dice jail or a dice vault. That is awesome. Now, part of your process is you like when I've watched some of your materials and so forth, you talk about print testing and import. Can you talk to us about what that means? What do you mean by print testing?
So all of my files are guaranteed to print without supports. So those of you who are new to 3D printing, you can't print in air. You have to have some sort of structure to build up to. So if you have a rooftop that has a very sharp angle between the tower and the roof, you have to print them separately or put plastic supports under it. So for me to make that guarantee, I have to make sure I can print it without supports. So the Wizard Tower, for instance, I have like 10 of those in my house because I would print it and then realize that there was one part that didn't print so well. So I'd have to go back and kind of rework it and then print it again. But then now also I have about 100 print testers too. I always print test everything on my end, but they print test too because there's so many different kinds of printers, and some are better than others, and I want to make sure it's printable by the full gamut of printers.
So how do you do that? So like, I imagine now you've kind of got an eye for it where you know that, okay, I got to change this design because there's no way I can do this without support, which my understanding is you then have to cut the supports off and you might have to sand things and hide it. It just is not as nice, right?
Yeah.
But how did you start doing that from the beginning? Like, was it something that you thought, this is a problem I want to solve with my particular designs?
So I had crappy printers. And I would try to print stuff, and when things aren't leveled properly and you try to print supports, it just creates a pile of spaghetti because it would knock stuff down.
Yeah.
So I got tired of trying to print this stuff with supports, so I started designing stuff without supports so I could print it. And then I learned there's a lot of things with angles, and there's ways to build up structures that look natural or look intentional that build up the structure so it prints without those supports. And I still make mistakes. Sometimes I'll have like a really cool rock texture that kind of prints in the air and creates spaghetti. So sometimes I might not even notice it until I print it. But I'm a little better at now that I've been doing all these towers.
A lot of trial and error, I guess, too, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's cool for people that are backing this when they get their files. These are not just theoretical files. These are files that have been actually tested. So they know that this is actually going to work. There's another thing you talked about, which is file splitting. Can you explain what file splitting is?
Yeah. Like I'll use the Wizard Tower for example. It has this beautiful trunk, cylindrical shape, and then it has a really cool pyramid shaped rooftop. I have to separate them so they print without supports, but also some printers have a smaller print area. So I split them so they fit on most printers. And when I say most printers, I mean more filament printers, FDM printers, and some larger resin printers. But there's teeny tiny resin printers like the Anycubic Photon. It has a 2.5-inch space to work with, and I don't cut stuff that small.
Yeah. So, and you talked about some things that are split, I guess, vertically as well. And what's the difference between splitting something vertically versus horizontally?
So most things are split horizontally.
Oh, okay, horizontally, yeah.
And then I am considering splitting things vertically for larger
like taller printers and things, right? Yeah.
But I'm still doing research on that and print testing to make sure that's a solid thing I can do to all the files for the next campaign.
One thing I thought was really cool when I was reading through the campaign is the level of support that you offer your backers. Like, it's not just like, here's your files, guys. See you next campaign. Like, you actually have a support group for people that do 3D printing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm in touch with these people pretty much all day, my backers, and we have a print support group. So anybody who backs the campaign, who is new to 3D printing can join the Facebook group. And, we had a number of people, like I said before, who never owned a printer before.
Yeah.
Through my volunteers in the support group, they are able to print anything now, which is really super cool. But now I have 3,200 backers from the previous campaign with all the late backers that joined us. Wow. So I try to make sure that I'm available for questions. If there's issues with files, like, I need to be aware of it, because I want my product to be solid enough that people are getting their money's worth, essentially.
And you also, so I saw there's some pledge levels as well where merchants can actually get a license. So how does that work? Because I would imagine with something like a 3D printable file, kind of like when you go on Thingiverse, right? There's kind of an honor system, but once it's out there, what stops somebody from just taking it, printing it, and selling it? So how do you deal with that?
That is a good question. So we have a couple hundred merchants now.
Yeah.
And you better know if there is someone out there printing something and selling it that they're not supposed to, I will hear about it. And then I have to go through the right channels like Etsy. I'll report it and all that. I usually will reach out to the person first, but I do keep an eye on things. But those merchants, they are on it.
Yeah. Well, I guess because they're trying to sell too, and they are selling a licensed
Exactly.
version, right? So they don't want
Yep.
someone down the street just doing a knockoff. And then there's some kind of like ID tag or something like that I was reading
Yeah.
about where,
Yeah. So no other 3D modelers offered this before. So it was really hard to know who was a merchant and who wasn't.
yeah,
So I did a lot of thinking on how I can identify my merchants. So I came up with this ID tag that has the logo and they have a specific number, and I have a whole spreadsheet of who owns which number and all that. So when someone is flagged as a questionable merchant, I could go through and see, oh, they don't have a merchant ID there, so then I know that they might not be a merchant. So it makes it easier and less awkward, because you don't want to be reaching out to someone who paid you lots of money and going, hey, you shouldn't sell those.
yeah. It's like, whoa, wait a second, come on, man. I backed you on your
Yeah,
campaign twice. What's
exactly.
going on?
You should know me.
I thought I
Sure.
was your buddy.
Yeah.
What's going on? Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
And so they'll take your the file, and then they can then print off as many as they want,
Yep.
and then they sell them. They mark them up, I guess,
Yeah.
and they sell them. And I just want to kind of put this in context. These aren't people selling like a couple, like they're
No.
selling lots, right?
Yeah. So, they have to put a lot of effort into it. It's not something you can just put on Etsy and want it to sell. Like, some of these people are actually spending a lot of time and effort on Instagram, Facebook, and other places,
Yeah.
sharing their prints. But yeah, some of them will paint them. Some of them will add like moss, and they'll make it their own, which is super cool.
That's cool.
But I have several backers that they had one printer or maybe two printers, and this legitimately became their full-time job. And now they have a print farm, and now they're actually printing and selling other makers' models that they're licensed to sell. So it's
That's
super
cool.
cool that for some of them, this was the foothold that they needed
Yeah.
to sell other creators' products and become a merchant for them too, which that's so cool for me.
How long does it take to print one of these? So take your typical one of these large towers. Is it like a full day? Like, because I'm just trying to think, if you're a merchant trying to print,
so
and then
that's a big question. So it depends on your settings. I print at 0.15 layer heights with a 0.6 nozzle. So it takes me usually 24 hours to print a full tower and its tray. Sometimes longer. Let's see. Sometimes it's 2 days. I have Cthulhu from my new campaign printing right now, and that's a 40-hour print. So at full scale, they do take days, but when you have several printers, you can print one per day. 30 a month is a good side gig, I think. But some of them have a lot more printers, so they can do this full time.
And how often do people have like their, say, 19 hours in, and then the computer cuts out, or the file misprints, or
so printing is not for the faint of heart. 3D printing, I have never sworn so much in my life.
Yeah.
And I got into 3D printing, and oh man, sometimes it's so frustrating. The good thing about, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it can be dangerous as well, right? Like there's a local college here where a whole wing of the college burnt down because a 3D printer caught on fire. Yeah.
Oh yeah, don't buy cheap printers.
Okay.
I know that's happened on a few occasions. In general, it's I think it's thermal runaway, where the machine itself doesn't know it's heating up beyond its caps. But I know that happens less. It's a new technology, and unfortunately with new technologies, when you have lots of different companies wanting to be in the market, it's easy to have faulty machinery.
Yeah, and I guess as the technology keeps improving, safety is obviously something that's built in. And I got a buddy who's got a 3D printer, and I mean, he's like, he's got like an actual area where he's got it set up where there's like actually a metal pan below it and so forth. So he's got additional safety measures on top.
Oh yeah.
just in case
Yeah.
something happens, right? Just to make sure it's okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
the current campaign you have right now, last I checked, again, Canadian dollars, you're at roughly $110,000 on a goal of 7,500, 1,384 backers. I'm sure more have jumped in since we started talking.
Yeah.
Still 19 days to go. This is incredible. Like, this is probably going to exceed your last campaign, I think.
I hope so.
That's a safe bet, I think.
I have some fun things coming down the line of stretch goals I really want to unlock.
Yeah, no kidding. And so then what comes from here? Like, do you have are you already thinking about the third campaign or the next campaign to come? And kind of what's the plan there, and when's that going to come?
Oh man, some of the stuff I can't disclose quite yet, but there's some big exciting things coming. As far as Fate's End specifically, I'm considering actually doing a tabletop game, potentially next year with 3D printables as part of it. But I have a lot to think out and plan out. It might just be that people are still loving printing the pieces that they can then take into other games.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. I get a lot of feedback every day. And sometimes that sways my trajectory.
Well, certainly, I think you've honed in on something here that's pretty special, I think. And I know you got a huge fan base now, and I know you're probably thinking, "Well, do I do a third one or not?" But I'm sure your fans are going to insist that you do another campaign. And hopefully, when you get this game coming, we can get back on the binge and you can talk about it, because it sounds pretty exciting.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, I want to wish you all the best with this campaign. It's obviously doing very, very well, and it's going to continue to grow. And I want to wish you and your family all the best this coming year.
Thank you so much, James, and I appreciate your time.
No worries. You take care. Cheers.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.